Good afternoon, everybody. This is Omar Serrato with the Tilted Lawyer Podcast, and what is likely going to be my last video of 2026. I'm going to try to do a live stream tonight and just kind of recap everything that happened in what proved to be a very volatile 2025. Lots went on. I think that we have a lot to talk about, but we got to talk about this Rob Reiner case. I haven't been posting as much for really the last, let's just call it since September, because of my professional engagements, because of my workload. From being a lawyer, I'm actually a practicing attorney, and it has been a tumultuous and very busy, very trying 2025, heading into 2026. And in the midst of all that, so many things have happened that I haven't had the opportunity to speak to you guys about. But first and foremost, we got this Rob Reiner case. On December 14th, 2025, as we were all gearing up for the holidays, I learned that Rob Reiner, Hollywood legend, he had been around, forever. Literally, he's been in my life. All of my life, but he's been in everybody's life for like the last 60 years. His 32-year-old son, he stabbed to death his father and his mother. Rob Reiner and Michelle Reiner were found stabbed to death in their Brentwood home on that date, and hours later, he was arrested on suspicion of murder. He's now been charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, including a special circumstance for multiple victims that makes him eligible for the death penalty, life without the possibility of parole, and all of that. Well, actually, he didn't enter a plea. He didn't do anything. He had the arraignment continued at the request of his attorney, and that arraignment is now currently scheduled for January 7th, 2026, roughly 9 days from today. He appeared in a suicide prevention smock, which is a sign that that the authorities are concerned about his mental health and about what he might do while inside his jail cell. So he has means, and as such, he has obtained the help of world-renowned trial attorney Alan Jackson of Karen Reed fame. I don't know many other attorneys that are in Alan Jackson's league when it comes to criminal defense. I certainly couldn't just off the top of my head pinpoint an attorney out there that would be better than Alan Jackson. Alan Jackson is a decorated attorney, and he is taking the reins of this defense, and he's going to be defending Nick Reiner. It should be perhaps not a surprise to anybody that, the physical evidence is going to be overwhelming against Nick. There is a well-established timeline that the general public knows about, and I'm certain that if the general public knows about it, there's probably a rich exhibit list already burgeoning with timeline exhibits that are going to show time, place, circumstance, and so forth. There was a substance abuse addiction that has been documented really for years with this kid. The night before, on December 13th, he was arguing with his father. It was this heated exchange at Conan O'Brien's house. And so there's not much in the way of, I didn't do this, it was somebody else, it was some intruder or whatever. So the only other viable defense is this not guilty by reason of insanity plea. The problem with that, and I will talk about the legalities of all of that, is he's going to have to convince everybody that he was incapable of being able to decipher between right and wrong. That's really, really, really hard to do. And so, usually when it's an insanity defense, it's like, hey, there was some kind of psychosis. He thought he was Jesus Christ and he was slaying demons. He had no way of knowing that what he was doing was actually a grave crime that would land him in jail. He literally thought that he was saving the heavens from falling into the depths of hell. It's got to be some kind of defense that mirrors or matches the gravity of what I have just described. It's the old McNaughton rule, where a defendant is legally insane only if they did not understand the nature and the quality of their actions or could not distinguish between right. And that is an insanely high burden to prove. And good luck doing that, because I don't remember specifically when I want to say like maybe in the 50s or 60s, it became like a really big deal, and people were obsessed with, oh, there's split personalities. I was guilty because I have like 13 personalities. And it wasn't me, it was my ninth personality, Fred, who actually committed the murders. I had nothing to do with it. And so that gave rise to a whole host of intellectual discussions about the realities of, is that even a real thing? Is this real? And whether it is or not, I mean, it's been well documented. I'll save that for the professionals. But what's 100% accepted and used in court is the presence of psychosis, whether or not your brain has prevented you or created a separate reality whereby you believe that the crime you were committing in real time is actually the right thing to do, or you're doing it for some noble purpose, or you're doing some thing that is not a crime, or you're saving babies or something. I don't know. There are documented cases like that. I'm not sure if Nick Reiner is going to meet the threshold. Even in severe mental illness cases, that does not guarantee that an insanity defense is going to work out. Because let's just say, okay, look, I've heard cases of guys that have been abusing heroin for years, and because of that, they had developed psychosis because they were hearing voices. Like legitimately, they were seeing things. They were seeing like ghosts in their vision and hearing voices telling them what to do. And yeah, it was an annoyance, but it never rose to the level of them knowing intellectually that murdering somebody without provocation is actually against the law, is actually a bad thing to do, is actually frowned upon by society. So it's not enough to say that he has these mental illnesses. He's going to have to prove that the reality that he experienced on December 14th, 2025, when he committed the physical acts that led to the demise of his parents, that his existence was rooted in something completely different than what you and I, you who are watching this video, are experiencing right now. It's a completely separate reality where he believes that what he's doing is actually not a crime, is actually not wrong, or is actually some other thing. That's it. Good luck doing that. The defense, Alan Jackson and his legal team, have already exercised a tactic basically declaring a doubt about Nick's mental state, which essentially pauses court proceedings until such date where that doubt can be alleviated. And so a couple of things are going to happen. If he's not found competent to stand trial, then they will hold him in prison until they get him to a state where he is competent to stand trial. They will pause everything until whatever doubt they have is removed. And of course, if they remove the doubt, then we're just going to continue. And so I don't know what's going on with him now. I don't know if he's in a mental health facility right now. I don't know if they have him on medication. I'd imagine that they do. But assuming that they're going to continue down that road, they will not continue the proceedings until he is found to be competent. And to that regard, who knows if this continues on January 7th or to some other late date. There's nothing really unusual about. So what that does is it allows Alan Jackson and his team to put together a live Z packet, which is essentially a list of mitigating factors to trying to convince the DA not to seek the death penalty in this case. This doesn't seem to me, this is not going to be a case about whether or not he did this or not. This is going to be a case about his mental health. And so if they're I 100% guarantee they're already in the process of accumulating all of the mitigating factors and trying to make the case to the DA that they should not seek the death penalty in this case because, look, he was a good kid and, you know, he just succumbed to the pressures of Hollywood, being the son of a mega celebrity movie director, Rob Reiner, who has this, you know, net worth of $200 million or whatever it is, and has made this cavalcade of quality films and is this legend at this point in the Hollywood spheres. And, you know, there's a lot of pressure that comes with being the child of somebody of that stature. And so I'd imagine they're going to try to make the argument, look, he was this good kid and here he is. He was 7 years old. He's wearing his Little League outfit and he was just playing ball. And because of the pressures or whatever, he succumbs to substance abuse. But when he was sober, he volunteered at the homeless shelters and, you know, giving away holiday meals or whatever. And but for his addiction and but for all of these mitigating factors, he would have ended up being a outstanding member of society. Instead, what we have is a tragic set of circumstances where his parents are gone. And his life, no matter what you guys decide to do with him, is never going to be the same. And isn't that a shame? That's what Jackson and his team are compiling right now. I don't know how much that has been compounded by the fact that Rob Reiner is a beloved figure almost universally amongst all circles. I mean, save for Trump, Donald Trump, who had some very choice words to say about Rob the night after his passing. I have never heard anybody speak ill of Rob Reiner pretty much ever. I mean, that goes all the way back to the days All in the Family, where he was like this young guy in his 20s. He was always like the voice of reason to Carol O'Connor's, politically incorrect character. I really liked that guy. He had like there was an energy about him, a likable energy about him. And there's a lot of people that were upset by hearing of what happened. And so we'll see how Nathan is going to handle it. So let's just assume that this is not going to settle and that this is going to go to trial. If that happens, you have to remember first degree in California requires intent to kill with premeditation. He's being charged with first degree. Not second degree, first degree. That means malice of forethought. That means a premeditated plan. That means that he planned to do this. And there is certainly lots of evidence that are pointing in that direction. Obviously, the mental health defense, who knows? I'd imagine that's what Alan Jackson's going to run with. Speaking to premeditation is this now infamous incident that happened at Conan O'Brien's house just hours before the murders. There was obviously something that happened. He was upset about something. Does that rise to the level of premeditation? I guess we're going to have to see. And if he's mentally ill, is he like writing in a diary? Is he writing about demons? Is he writing about, I need to kill my dad? Is he, did he purchase a knife? Or, there's lots of questions, certainly. Jackson is certainly going to say that the actions were not pre-planned, that what happened was a tragedy of epic proportions. It was an unnecessary escalation that went awry. There was never any pre-planned idea that he was going to walk into that house and take the lives of his parents in the brutal fashion in which he did. That's going to be problematic because he slayed not one, but two individuals. Multiple victims usually points to a rage so severe, an anger so prominent, that even upon seeing the death of one, you go out and you look for another. After seeing the aftermath, it wasn't like, oh, I snapped and accidentally shot somebody in the face. The act of carving up somebody's throats and watching them bleed out is a very personal, violent crime, where it's going to be very difficult for anybody, even Ellen Jackson, to argue that there wasn't some measure of, hey, maybe you should stop and think about what you're doing. I don't know, and perhaps it's come out, I haven't seen anything reliable that I would rely on. I don't know the order of death, but let's just say that it was Rob. Rob was the first one to succumb to his injuries. And then he goes after his mom, and then he slashes her throat. Or let's just say he gets upset at something that his mom said, and then he goes after his dad. And I don't know, you're going to have to... The insanity defense is really, realistically, his best shot at something. I do not see a jury, number one, there's very few people that don't know who Rob Reiner is. I just don't see a jury on these facts looking at Nick favorably in any way. They're going to have to go with the insanity defense. They're going to have to say that this was the result of some kind of a psychological break, some kind of a psychosis. Jackson has already hinted that, hey, let's just allow the whole system to move forward. Let's not rush to judgment. And of course, those are the things that we say, but what's to judge? What's to judge? This isn't like I'm trying to judge, his moral compass here. I mean, it's pretty black and white. He took the lives of his parents in a brutal serial killer-esque fashion. There's not a whole lot to judge there. It's pretty black and white. Unless you want to tell me it was some act of psychosis, you better be pretty freaking compelling. I mean, tell me there is some exorcist-level possession going on here and have that actually stick in a way that it's never worked in California courts, really for the last 60, 70 years. Good luck Good luck with that. I have not had the opportunity to properly mourn Rob Reiner. The way that I was introduced to him is I recognize his character on the TV show All in the Family. So back when I was in middle school, you know, we had cable, sort of, but it was like in its infancy. It was like the scrolling cable. There was no streaming services. And so you watched what was on. And I would often get up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and I would watch Sports Center at 5 a.m. until 6. And then at 6 a.m., All in the Family would come on. What's Happening would come on right after that. There was all these shows, these old TV shows that I used to watch. Rob Reiner's character was somebody that I had identified with as a very young man, because Carroll O'Connor's character, if you have never watched that show, he's very, you know, machismo, misogynistic, racist. He's very much a product of the 1950s, that character. And that show, All in the Family, is legendary for bringing the very mature intellectual capacities of America as it dealt with social structure, social integration. I mean, we're just off of the heels of integrating the schools, the Civil Rights Act in 1964. I mean, all of these things were very much, there's like this episode of All in the Family where Carroll O'Connor takes a sip on accident from like a glass of water that Sammy Davis Jr. had drank from, and he didn't realize it. And then he like has this like visceral reaction. And then Sammy Davis Jr. kisses him on the cheek at the end of it, and like this huge, like shocking moment on television, like, oh my God, a black man put his lips on a white man, the travesty of it all. And it was for a specific purpose. I think that like part of the point of that show was to expose the absurdity of people's viewpoints in the 70s. You know, what are we doing? Look how foolish you look. And, you know, Carroll O'Connor did a remarkable job playing that character, but Rob Reiner served very much as this progressive voice. In you know, I mean, whatever you think about his politics on that show, I identified with him because he was this young man that had all of these really good ideas about how to save the world, and he was always up against Carroll O'Connor with these archaic social viewpoints, and that was kind of the interplay of the show between the two of them. That was my introduction to him. And, you know, as I grew up, I didn't realize that Rob Reiner, the director, and Rob Reiner, the guy in All in the Family, were the same guy until like much later in life. Oh my God, that's the same guy, because he kind of looks completely different. But look at his catalog of movies. The Princess Bride, never really been a fan, but I will fully acknowledge that it is one of the greatest classic fairy tales that's ever been written, universally praised by women and children and men alike, for that matter. People love that movie. I don't get it, but people love it. I mean, Andre the Giant was in it. That was cool. You know, it wasn't for me back then. I've tried to watch it with my daughters now, and, you know, it's fine. But a classic, iconic movie, When Harry Met Sally, yet another movie that I was just talking about with my brothers. Like, you know, I didn't really get When Harry Met Sally. 1989, I was telling my brother, I guess at 9 years old, I didn't give a shit about these two people and their love affair, whatever they were doing. Did not care. Misery, 1990, to this day, unabashedly in the top 10 horror flicks of all time. I don't care where you put it, but it's got to be in the top 10. Misery from 1990, Kathy Bates. I had no idea that he was the director of that movie, but just an iconic horror movie, A Few Good Men. There's not a viewer amongst you who have not encountered people reciting lines from A Few Good Men. There's just no way. There was others, The American President, Goes to Mississippi, The Story of Us in 1999, Alex and Emma, The Bucket List. He was also in, Spinal Tap. This was Spinal Tap, a 1984 documentary or faux documentary. That was a big thing. The Wolf of Wall Street, an epic film. And for, you know what? I don't know why, but whenever I thought about that movie, I always thought that Scorsese was the one who directed that film. Never mind his director credits. What about his, I mean, he had some iconic roles. We talked about All in the Family. He was in Wolf of Wall Street. He was in his, you know, the fake documentary, but this is Spinal Tap in 1984. He was in The First Wives Club. He was in Primary Colors, 30 Rock. He guest voiced on The Simpsons all the time. He was on Curb Your Enthusiasm. Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place, The Bear, the cooking show that some of you guys watch. Anyway, just an iconic Hollywood figure that we're never going to get back. His movies, I don't know what it was about him, but his movies just always hit. And they were always just action-packed, dense. There was no fluff with his films. Like, if you turn on just A Few Good Men, it doesn't matter where you put the movie on. I think that movie's like 2 hours long. You could pick it up 27 minutes in, an hour and a half in, and you're in for whatever the scene is. He had this knack of just understanding how movies and storytelling had to go. And so it's, it's hard really to process that he's gone. He is. And the backdrop of all of it is, his son's mental health, substance abuse, addiction, whatever you want to call it. I never would have imagined that he would go out like that. I mean, he deserved a hero's welcome. He deserved, the big night at the Emmys. Let's all remember the career of Rob Reiner, one of those. And he surely was due for it, but here we are. And then, of course, Donald Trump. Look, I'm not here to talk about politics, but, whatever you think about Donald Trump, what he said about Rob Reiner, just taking that opportunity to rip Rob's politics because he was liberal-leaning, because he was a Democrat, saying that he had a crippling disease known as TDS, Trump derangement syndrome. He was driven crazy. Rob Reiner was a deranged person. I was not a fan of Rob Reiner. Like, anybody gives a shit about his opinion of Rob Reiner. And it was just so petty and petulant of a person in Trump's position to say something like that about a guy as universally loved about Rob Reiner. Would he say something like that if there wasn't a third election coming up? I don't know. And it doesn't matter. It sucks that Trump had to have that reaction to all of that. I did want to talk about a little bit about, before I get off of this topic, I did want to talk a little bit about the insanity defense just as a concept. Where does it come from? It comes from the English common law. And the idea was that you can't punish somebody criminally if they have no mental ability or capacity to decipher between right or wrong. There's something cruel and inhumane to do that. And because of that, we've taken that idea in the 20th century, and California has formalized it by the entry of not guilty plea by reason of insanity, which is forthcoming for Nick pretty soon. The test that California uses, and I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, is the McNaughton rule. And it's really old school. It's basically 2 questions. And the defense only needs one, but it's a very, very, very difficult bar to achieve. And the questions are this: at the time that the crime was committed, because of mental disease or defect, did the person not understand the nature and quality or gravity of the act? That's question 1. The second question is, at the time that the crime was committed, because of mental disease or defect, did the individual not know that it was wrong? And you could even argue that those are kind of basically asking the same thing, but California treats them as 2 separate questions. But if the answer to either of those questions is yes, then it'll stick. Then it might work out. Here's the thing. California does not recognize, I don't know, man, I just blacked out and I don't know what I was doing. I blacked out, and next thing I knew, I looked up and 2 people were dead. And I looked and my hands were bloody and I have no idea what I did. We don't accept that I couldn't control myself. We don't accept convenient, involuntary blackouts as a thing. It's not a thing that California will recognize. Because if you wake up and you realize that that was wrong, you would have to prove that you literally left your body, and you had no concept of what you were doing, which is really difficult to establish if before you did it, you knew that it was wrong, and after you did it, you knew that it was wrong, and you took steps to cover it up. But for the 5 minutes that you were committing the crime, that's when you lost all concept of reality. Good luck with that defense. That's not how it works in California, and really, I don't think that's how it works just about anywhere in America. The biggest twist in Californian history, so the reality of it is, it's a really big misconception that, I could just plead, that not guilty by reason of insanity is like this common thing that works all the time. It works like in less than 1% of the cases. And among the cases where it's raised, the success rate is really, really small. I mean, I could think of maybe a handful, a couple, some kind, but it is not a thing that you ever plead expecting to win. There was one case, People versus Skinner, where the defendant killed under the delusional belief that God had commanded it. That was the example that I'd given you before, that he was crusading as some angelic warrior for God. And he was so delusional, so mentally ill, he had psychosis to the level that he legitimately thought that it was saving the heavens from the depths of hell. And in that moment, it was found that he could not, under those conditions, understand moral wrong. That's the kind of case where this plea will work. Florid psychosis, delusions that completely and utterly distort reality and morality. That's what we're looking for. There's another famous case, Richard Chase tried it, the Vampire of Sacramento. Some of you guys might remember that case from way back. He was deeply mentally ill, but the jury rejected his insanity pleas and convicted him. Why? Because if the jury believes that you understood what you were doing at the time that you did it, then it's game over for you. And it turns out that he was actually mentally ill. The problem was, it is 100% a thing that you can be mentally ill and still decipher between right and wrong. There it is. There's another case, Kenneth Bianchi, the Hillside Strangler. He tried the multiple personalities angle. I think there's a whole documentary on Netflix about it, where is it? Yeah, it wasn't me. It was like my 37th personality. There's 50 of me swimming around in here. And, you know, and it was this whole thing where they were trying to, hey, so is a split personality a thing? And then there was some reports that, well, it must be, because like one of his personality like writes perfect German, speaks different dialects, speaks different languages or whatever. It turns out it was all bullshit. So look, respect to Alan Jackson for, and they haven't pursued this as a defense yet, but I suspect this is where they're going. He's not trying to get Nick Reiner out of the consequences of what he did via some loophole, some magical plea that's going to work in California. That's not how this works. If they pursue this as a plea, it's because there's probably some real psychological stuff going on with this kid. Maybe schizophrenia, maybe a history of psychosis, maybe delusions, maybe, you know, stuff that arose from his substance abuse treatments. I don't know. But he's going to have to come up with something. But they're still going to have to answer the fundamental question. Did he know what he was doing when he did it? And did he know that it was wrong? That's it. So best of luck to Nick, or not best of luck to Nick, depending on how you want to look at it. But look, if he's going to plan to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, good luck with that, and not likely to work.